Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Peaceful Solution Certification class. We're going to go ahead and get started. We left off, we're in the character unit, the intermediate series, character unit, page 19. And we're going to pick up talking about negative character. Now, I hope all of you remember the things that we covered in the last class. We talked about the positive side of character and how developing our character is so important. We talked a little bit about how our character is developed, where it comes from, where it originates, which it comes from the way we were raised, our family, our genetics, our environment, and the things that we value. They help to build our character, our influences, and all those things help to mold and shape our character. We talked about values specifically and how important they are. The things that we value, if we value our positive character, we'll develop our positive character. If we value possessions and money and other people more than we value our character, we won't work as hard on developing our character as we work on developing those things, and we could compromise our character. So we got to remember that. We also talked about morals and just how important morals are. And if you remember, morals are it's like a dividing line that determines what's right and what's wrong. And we can tell if something's right if it doesn't cause harm to ourselves, if it doesn't cause harm to others, if it doesn't cause harm to the environment around us, if it doesn't break rules. That's how we can tell something's right. And the wrong is just the opposite. It causes harm to all those things. So, and you can divide that into behavior and attitude towards all life, towards others, meaning ourselves and others, people, animals, plants, possessions and property, and towards the environment as a whole. And if it causes harm to those things, you can tell it's a wrong choice. And it's really that simple. We talked a bit about ownership and then the positive side of character, which is what we should be developing. And all of us, everybody in society today, has both positive character traits and negative character traits. And for the most part, people are trying to develop, they're trying to be, quote unquote, what they know as great people. For the most part, people aren't going out of their way to try to be bad people. Sure, there are some. But for the most part, people are trying to be great people. They just don't fully have the tools that we're learning here right now to know how to properly become the best person that they can be. And that's why we're all learning this, because we're striving to be the best people that we can be, to build our positive character so that we can share it with others. And as we've learned before, the only way to truly lead others is by first learning to lead yourself properly. So that's what we're trying to do. And in order to do that, we're striving to become people of integrity. And that's where we left off last week, talking about integrity. And integrity is when you have developed a positive character and you're practicing it constantly and you've internalized it, you've allowed it to become the basis of all your actions. That's when you become a person of integrity. Now, think about that word integrity a little bit. There's several words that you can kind of bounce off of that word integrity. You have to integrate. You have integral. If any of y'all have worked on equipment or machinery, you might hear, okay, this part of the machine isn't working. The machine's integrity is compromised. So it's the same thing with us. When one of these positive character traits or one of our character traits isn't working properly or we aren't applying it properly, our integrity becomes compromised. We aren't working up to our full potential. We aren't working up to be a member of society like we should be. Because each of those positive character traits are an integral part of who we should be. And they should be integrated. And I'm just saying this to help us understand this word integrity. When all of those things are working and all cylinders are firing properly with our positive character, we've become a person of integrity. And all of us are striving to become people of integrity every single day. So that's the positive side of character. Now, just as important as understanding the positive side of character is understanding the negative side of character, because the only way to truly, I guess you can say, fight your enemy, which would be the negative things that we're trying to get rid of our character, is to understand how it operates. And the negative side of character is just as important. It's just as important to understand that. So, when we, and I'm reading off of Lesson Plan 1, page F here, for those of you who have the teacher's manual. I'm reading off of this page, and it says, factual knowledge in step 5. Factual knowledge and experience, coupled with the values one possesses, aid in producing both negative and positive character traits that will influence one's behavior. So we're going to talk about this negative side of character specifically, but it's important that we become educated about these, like it says here. So on page 19 at the top, it says negative character traits. What is negative character? Negative character traits define who you are just as clearly as positive traits. They too are a combination of values, environment, and experiences, just like we covered in the previous pages, where your character is developed from. And you can cross-reference that with page 4 there, where it talks about where your character comes from. Values, environment, and experiences. However, unlike positive character traits, negative traits can lead to behaviors that could cause hatred, violence, and even wars. Why? Because those negative character traits cause you to do things that cause harm to yourself, cause harm to others. When you cause harm to others, you raise hurt feelings. When people have hurt feelings and they don't have self-control, there's conflict and war. So these negative character traits lead to behaviors that cause hatred, violence, and even wars, because nobody likes to be treated unfairly. And that's what these negative traits lead to. If you treat someone dishonestly or show a lack of compassion, you are saying that you do not care about that person. You don't respect that person. Because showing care, showing compassion, is part of showing respect. If that person also has a negative character and responds to you in a disrespectful or aggressive way, then you have what is known as a conflict. And that's already leaning towards the negative side of conflict, because conflict is simply a disagreement. However, when that conflict doesn't have a peaceful solution, or when people are exhibiting negative character traits to fuel that conflict, it can quickly turn into a war, or a dispute, or a fight. You know, there's conflicts that occur every single day. You know, in families, there's conflicts, and it's almost necessary to have these slight disagreements so that we can work out issues and work out problems if they can be discussed and solved properly. In the workplace, for instance, if two people have differing points of views, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And both of them might be right. One person might have a way of doing something, and another person might have a way of doing something. And there's two ways you can handle that. They could get in a fight about it, or they could discuss it and say, here's the way I do it, here's the way you do it. Let's find a middle ground. Let's find the best way to do it. That's a way to work out that conflict in a positive way. That's how conflicts should be worked out. And that's what makes conflicts a great thing if they're worked out properly. But these conflicts here that are a result of negative, disrespectful, aggressive behavior aren't solved when these negative character traits are all that comes into play. So without that peaceful solution, if somebody also has a negative character and you have a negative character, then you have like what Abraham Lincoln had. When two fools lose their head together, you have a huge problem because nothing's getting solved. It results in hatred and violence. Here's another example. Let's say someone who is dishonest steals money from someone who is unforgiving. Let's break that down a little bit. So someone who's dishonest they don't value the positive character trait of honesty more than they value possessions. And if you go back to that page on values, then you realize just how important it is to value that positive character. So they don't value their positive character more than they value possessions. Page 6 talks about values. But so let's say I'm a dishonest person. I value money. I will get money however I can get money, and it doesn't matter if it hurts you, it doesn't matter if it hurts you, I want money. So I'm going to go and I see your wallet on the table, I take your wallet. That's, of course, wrong. That's very dishonest. Now, let's say you, or whoever I take the wallet from, is a revengeful person, or an unforgiving person. They find out I took the wallet, they don't forgive me, they build hatred up against me, and now we have a fight. Both of us are in the wrong, and we have a huge fight, a huge dispute. Violence might occur, hurtful words might occur. We might end up in prison, who knows, because of what could escalate from this situation. So that's how negative situations occur and become worse and worse. So the person who was stolen from will try to retaliate against the one who stole from him. This too can result in hatred and violence. Now, what's so awesome about these concepts is that the same concepts that can work in solving disagreements and problems between children, between a family at home, between coworkers, will solve problems between nations. It's one and the same concept. So let's say you have a nation that steals from another nation. If the leaders in that nation are revengeful, you have what? You have a war. And that's what we see in society today. It's literally the same concepts, just on a wider or a smaller scale. So once you learn these basic concepts, don't underestimate yourself. You have the power. This knowledge here is the power to solve conflicts between nations. It's the power to solve conflicts to solve the world's problems, really. So that's why learning these things are so important, because once you understand how to solve these problems between yourself and the people that you're in, that you have relationships with, and among other people, you can scale those very same concepts to deal with huge corporations, huge businesses, states, nations, countries, etc. It's the very same concepts. It's that simple. And of course, you'll have to apply them in different ways, but it's the same concepts. So this results in hatred and violence. Below are a few negative character traits. Become familiar with them so that you can eliminate these traits from your character if you recognize them in yourself. And it's very important to not just, when we go over these traits, and you should go over them on your spare time too, if at all possible, don't look at them as though, okay, that's bad. So-and-so has that trait. I recognize that trait in Jim Bob. No, look at yourself and say, is there any way that I'm possibly exhibiting this trait? Do I have some of this? And it's likely that you'll find some of it in yourself. That doesn't make you a bad person. That makes you human. We've been raised in a pretty crazy society, so it's only normal that we would have some of these negative character traits in ourselves. So don't beat yourself up because of it. Like it says here, work to eliminate them from yourself. And the only way to eliminate a negative trait from yourself is by focusing on the opposite positive character trait. So if I'm a disrespectful person, I can try to beat myself up for being disrespectful and say I'm going to stop being disrespectful all day. But I won't stop being disrespectful until I go out of my way to learn how to be respectful and to work on accentuating that positive character trait, which we'll get to in a couple of pages. So let's go ahead and start here. Uneducated. Uneducated, it's the exact opposite of the character trait educated, which we covered last week. Making a decision without getting all the facts. Making a decision without getting all the facts. Now, it's important to notice this trait of education, either uneducated or being educated, is always given first in the peaceful solution. Why? Because in order to, remember, knowledge is power. Basic bottom line. But in order to understand any of these things, in order to have self-control, which is the foundation of all positive character, you have to first understand how. You have to first become educated about it. So education is so important. It's the most important one. Because the fact that you're coming here is you getting educated. In order for somebody to even want to change their behavior and become a better person, they would come to you to learn these things and become educated. And that's how they start to improve. That's how you start to improve, is first admitting, I don't know everything. I can become more educated. So making a decision without getting all the facts is uneducated. That's very dangerous. For example, your friends offer you some glue to sniff. You ask, won't that mess with my head? Your friend replies, nah, it's safe and it just makes you high. Well, that's pretty much an oxymoron there. Without any further investigation, you agree. So, doing anything that causes harm to yourself, remember the bottom line, causes harm to yourself, is a negative behavior because it's literally destroying your body, slowly but surely. And the more you do it, the closer you come to death, to dying. You're literally killing yourself by doing harmful things to your body. So, when you are educated, before you do anything or before you try to partake in a behavior, you understand, you find out the risks that are involved in it, and you try to understand the benefits that are involved in it. And if there's risks that are hurting yourself, it's not something you want to do. You want to find a different way to achieve your goal. If it's something like this, where you're just trying to use a substance to cause to get high off of it, that's not a great idea because you're literally destroying parts of your brain. And your brain is what you use to make decisions for the rest of your life. Why would you want to destroy that? That's your most valuable asset, your mind. So that in itself will tell you that's not a wise decision to make. But with other things in life, with work, with jobs, a lot of times we can jump into the middle of something and do something just because we can without getting all the facts. When that's done, you end up bootlegging things, jimmy rigging things, and then you end up having to go back and fix it later because it wasn't done right. Or somebody else has to come in and fix it later because it wasn't done right as a result of not getting educated properly. Sometimes in situations you're put in places where you have to do things and you have to stop and take the time. It's better to stop and take the time to figure out how to do it first and try to do it properly. And all this, there's so much more we could go on about becoming educated. But it's so important to become educated about things before you do them. Or put yourself in a position where you're with somebody that can show you how to do it while you're doing it. That way you're making the right decisions. You're making the best decisions. And it's the same thing with yourself. Becoming educated about yourself, who you are. That way you can work any negative out that you have and start building positive in. That's becoming educated. The second one there is to be dishonest. To maliciously lie, cheat, or steal. The example here, for example, you saw Paula take Marco's dictionary without asking his permission. But when he asked you about it, you said you had no idea because you just don't like Marco. Something you'll notice about these negative character traits, the positive ones too, but the negative ones specifically in this situation, they feed off of each other. So in this scenario, somebody lied about Marco, but notice he also just didn't like Marco. So he didn't have a problem doing hateful things to Marco. So not only was he dishonest, he was also hateful, he lied, and you can list negative character traits that came from that one character trait of dishonesty. So they feed off of each other, and when you start applying a negative character trait, you'll have to start bringing in other negative character traits, and you overall become more of a negative person. That's why we should try to eliminate these negative character traits from ourselves and recognize when we see them cropping up in ourselves. And that takes humility. So dishonesty. Dishonesty is a very important one to understand because you can be dishonest without realizing it sometimes if you're not fully educated on how it works. If you're at work and you're just simply using a pen from work for your own personal things, you might not realize it, but that could be stealing from the boss or from the company. It's a really simple thing that oftentimes we overlook. But these little things that seem insignificant can turn into much bigger things over time if you allow them to become a habit and allow them to become a part of your life. Revengeful and unforgiving, number 3. To want to get even or get back at somebody, and that results from not being able to forgive. For example, Sally lent Jen her new pen, but Jen lost it. Jen did apologize to Sally and offered to buy her a new pen, but Sally did not accept Jen's apology. As soon as Jen got a new pen, Sally took Jen's pen when she wasn't looking and broke it. So not only was she unforgiving, she also retaliated and did something further to try to hurt the other person in return. And a lot of times when somebody is unforgiving along with revengeful, that's exactly what they'll do. And they get a satisfaction from getting back at the other person. They feel like they make an even playing field. But that's not the case at all. When two people are revengeful, look at nations, for instance. One fires at one nation, and the other nation wants to fire back bigger and bigger and bigger, and you have a war. You have a full-blown war because nobody's willing to take what they would call the lesser seat and be humble. I'm sure some of y'all have probably seen the video that the Peaceful Solution put out a while back, Tit for Tat, or Two Wrongs Don't Make a Right, where it just started with a simple somebody bumped into the other person. And then one person got a rock, and the other person got a bigger rock, and the other person got a gun, and then you had a machine gun, and then you had a grenade, and then you had a missile. And before you know it, they nuked each other, or one person nuked the other person, but they both died. And it just goes to show the irony of retaliation. Because nobody wins in a conflict where everybody's trying to get back at each other. And we can do that just among friends sometimes without even paying too much attention to it. Sometimes we can do it in innocent fun, where one person pokes a jab at the other person and the other person jabs back. And before we know it, there's hurt feelings. And friendships are scarred. So that's why it's so important to just not have this sort of behavior at all in the first place. And not have this revengeful attitude. But why is it so important to forgive? Why is it so important to forgive? Sometimes you might go without even realizing it, holding on to a grudge against somebody else. The Peaceful Solution refers that to, and I'm sure you've heard it in other places too, drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. A lot of times somebody might do something to you. Maybe they meant to do it. Maybe they meant to hurt you. Maybe they didn't. Maybe it was a complete accident. But you go on allowing this to fester in your mind, or we go on allowing this to fester in our mind. And we replay the situation over and over, and we try to dissect why this person would have done this. Oh, he probably hates me. He probably has a problem with me. I know he does. Oh, you see, he just went over there. He's looking at me. And you develop all of these scenarios in your mind, and you become paranoid about it. And you allow that one situation to run your life. It's literally controlling the things that you do. You're looking at people differently. He probably told him, and you're putting together a whole scenario that might not even exist in your mind. That's what it means by saying it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. You're literally ruining your life. You're allowing that one situation to control your life, while that other person has probably gone on with the rest of his life and doesn't even realize what's going on. And by the time you've attacked him and exploded on him, he's just, pinned in a corner like, what in the world is going on? But that's because you've been holding on to this resentment or this revenge. That's why that's so dangerous. And some people go throughout a large portion of their lives trying to get revenge on other people or holding on to this resentment against, even maybe parents or something that occurred when they were younger, and then they hold on to this. And that's why it's so important to learn to forgive. And a lot of times when you realize that you can forgive and then you do forgive somebody, it's like a weight got lifted off of your chest and you can go on with your life because that problem isn't running your life anymore. That's a very powerful trait to have, is that trait of forgiveness. I remember just recently the author actually talked about it, forgiving people, and how bearing a grudge is just so dangerous because you can go for years without you don't really think about it. You just have, anytime you think of a person or see a person, oh yeah, that person did that to me. And you've just got all these little problems in your mind that you haven't solved, you haven't forgiven, even in your own mind, that person. And finding those problems in your mind and actually solving them by forgiving them will free up a lot of space in your mind that you don't need used by other people in their prior problems. So revenge and being revengeful and unforgiving is very dangerous if you're not careful. Unreliable, number 4. When someone cannot be depended upon. For example, Jill had promised to assist you on your math project on 2 previous occasions, but never showed up. So when she volunteered to give you a ride to the library, you nicely refused. Now, if you notice there, that was trust that was broken. So when somebody is unreliable, they can't be trusted. They can't be relied upon to accomplish things for you, or to accomplish things for the team, or to accomplish things for the organization, or whatever it might be. So you really can't trust them with something, say, hey, can you be here at such and such a time to do this? Somebody who can be relied upon, you know that they'll either be there or say, hey, I can't be there for whatever reason. But notice she said, oh, I can pick you up, I'll take you, but you nicely refused and said, no, I'll find another way, because you know I'll probably be sitting here waiting for you, and then you never show up, or whatever occurs, and I could have just walked or found another way there and been there quicker. So you nicely refuse, and there's nothing wrong with that, because trust is something that has to be earned over time. Impatient, number 5. To be restless or short-tempered and easily aggravated. People who are impatient are not willing to wait. They want everything right away and become frustrated when their desires are not met. Now, we've kind of been, especially lately with, everything right at your fingertips. You got pocket computers as your cell phones, and you got smartwatches. You got all these things. You got on-demand streaming. You got all kinds of things that are just instant. We've kind of been brought up in a society where you're taught to be impatient. You're taught to have everything right away. And that's great. It's a convenience. But there are times when we have to wait for things. And that's a very valuable skill to have. Now, in the, I believe it's the grade 5 book, talks about how the character trait of patience is not just being able to wait for something, but also being able to wait without losing your cool and maintaining a positive attitude. That's another very important part of patience. Because it's one thing to wait and be griping the whole time and be screaming at people the whole time, but being able to wait and maintain your positive attitude and maybe even help with whatever is making the situation take longer is a very positive, important thing to have. So, aggressive is the next one. Capable of violent physical or verbal outburst. Carlos stepped on Rick's new shoes by mistake. Instead of waiting for Carlos to apologize, Rick immediately cursed him and pushed him against the wall. Now, a lot of people are brought up in an aggressive society. It could be the way that their family was at home. And none of this makes it right. None of this makes it okay. None of this makes it a moral thing to be aggressive. But a lot of people are raised up in that sort of aggressive society. Either maybe they grew up in a city where you had to constantly watch your shoulder and you had to put forth an aggressive persona. Otherwise, people would take advantage of you. Or maybe you were brought up in a household where everything was very aggressive. You did something wrong, you got slammed against a wall or beaten with a belt or something like that. Immediately, no second guesses, no questions. And that's something you have to kind of pay attention to and be empathetic with. That, like I said, it's not a right thing, but you have to realize a lot of people are brought up in that way. So it's something that's ingrained into them. And they might not even realize that the things that they do, the way they carry themselves, the things that they say, come across as very aggressive. So, especially if you're dealing with somebody who was brought up in this way and then somebody who wasn't, was brought up exactly the opposite. That person is going to seem extremely aggressive to them. So when you're teaching people about this positive character trait of aggressiveness, do remember that as well. And if any of y'all were brought up in that society yourselves, you also know what I'm talking about. So being aggressive is not a positive thing, and it's something you have to learn to tone down. And how do you learn to tone that down? You learn to look at things objectively and not subjectively. Meaning, and we talk about this later in the book too, but not taking things personally every time. Every time something comes across, don't look at it as an attack. Look at it as the situation that it is and try to solve it. You don't have to attack back every time, if you know what I mean. The next one is disrespectful, and this is a huge one. So huge that we have an entire volume on respect. And it's extremely important, this character trait of respect. But disrespectful is the opposite. Lacking care or concern for someone or something. For example, your dad told you it was time to do your chores. You got mad, went to your room, and slammed the door. So, not only was that being disrespectful to your parent, your dad, it was also being disrespectful to the property. You slammed the door. You could break things that way. But also, notice that it's showing care or concern. It's actually taking the time, putting forth the effort, the work, to think about the other person, to think about the belongings that you're using, to think about who owns. Just in the last class, we talked about who owns things. Everybody owns things. So when you take the time to stop and think about whatever it is you're dealing with, that's the start to showing respect. You're stopping to think, okay, who am I dealing with? I'm dealing with an authority figure. How do I need to deal with this person? Does he not like it if I walk away immediately? And you think about how you're dealing with this person. You show care and concern for them. If you're dealing with a possession, a belonging, if it belongs to so-and-so, oh, he doesn't like it when I leave this open on his belonging. So I need to make sure I close it because he set rules for it and I want to keep those rules. That's showing respect to that belonging. So it's literally taking the time to stop and think, to show this care and concern for somebody or their possessions, their belongings. And the opposite of that is being disrespectful. A lot of times we can be disrespectful without even realizing it. Sometimes it can be the way we're brought up. So when you're dealing with people, you have to show empathy, especially when you're teaching, and realize how people were brought up, their values, their influences, their family, their genetics. All these things determine their character, and you can't look at somebody and say, oh, he's just a rotten apple. He's one of the bad ones. I can't deal with him. I can't teach him. Everybody can learn these things and become the best person that they can be with the right training. But unless you take the time to realize, okay, this person might be a little bit worse off than this person because he was brought up differently. All of us, have negative traits. Some people more than others. That's okay. It's not okay that they're negative. They need to be working to become positive. But it's okay because you are teaching them to benefit themselves. You're teaching them to perfect their character. And that's what you have to remember. You have to look at them with an optimistic mindset. And that's what we're going to get into on the next page, probably the next teacher, but accentuating the positive. And you have to do that when you're dealing with yourself, getting rid of these negative traits, and you definitely have to do it when you're teaching others. It's very easy for somebody to look at the negative. When you're dealing with somebody, you can say, oh, he's such a negative person. He likes to gripe about everything. I don't like that person. And that's not solving any problems. That's not going to solve your disagreements or your differences with him. If you're teaching somebody, and man, he doesn't pay attention, he doesn't listen, I can't teach him. That's the wrong attitude to have. There's plenty of positive to find in people. Sometimes it takes a little bit of work, and that's okay. But when you're able to identify those positive traits that they have, and then work on accentuating those and incorporating the other positive traits that they need to develop in your training, that's how you start to convert them from a negative person or a possibly more negative than positive person into a positive person. And that's your job as a teacher. The job of a teacher is to see the potential that somebody has, not to look at how horrible they are or how bad that they might be. We're all bad in one way or another, and we're working to become positive. Remember that. Your job is to look at the potential that they have. Everybody has potential. Find that potential, and then work on accentuating the positive in order to eliminate the negative. And you can do that with coworkers, you can do that with relationships, friends, family. That's how you improve relationships and teach people to become positive people. That's your job as a teacher. And whether you're teaching a class or in a relationship, you are a teacher because you teach by your example. And you can also teach people to accentuate the positive through your own example. That's where you need to start. Okay, so the last one here that we're going to cover before I turn it over to the next teacher is hateful. An intense emotion that results in extreme dislike and hostility. Hate is derived from fear, anger, or perceived injury. Now, something that you'll notice is hate is derived from emotion. It says here. Now, that's an interesting concept, right? Hate can come from fear, anger, or perceived injury. Now, that doesn't mean that we need, when we experience these emotions, that we need to automatically turn to hate. But a lot of people do that. In fact, a lot of propaganda is used, it's created specifically to work on these emotions of fear and anger and perceived injury. If you can get a bunch of people to be afraid of another group of people, you can get them to hate them without any cause because you can just get them to fear that person. If you can lie to somebody and make them think so-and-so did this and get them angry at that other person, you can develop this character trait of hatred. That's very dangerous, but you can see how that's widely used in the world today. It's very, very powerful. So that's why we have to be on the lookout for this ourselves, and it's very easy to fall into this trap, especially if we're revengeful and unforgiving or aggressive, to fall into this trap of hating somebody else. Very easy, so you have to be careful. And that's why you have to control your emotions, which we'll get to in a later lesson. For example, some people are raised to believe that people who have a different skin color should be hated. And that's something that we see a lot in society today, and we've seen a lot of protests, a lot of riots, a lot of crazy things occurring just recently in the news and in society today because of this very problem. Because somebody has been raised or trained, taught to hate somebody else. You don't hop out of the womb hating somebody else because of the color of their skin. Now, I'm sure some of these things can be ingrained in people's genetics over the years and over time because your character is developed through your genetics. But it can also be taught out. It can be taught out. And it also can be taught in, for sure. You can teach somebody to hate somebody else just by spreading lies and gossip and hatred about that person simply because of the color of their skin, or the place that they came from, or their ethnicity, or their belief system, or whatever it might be. So that's something you have to be very careful, and it's easy to fall into that trap without even realizing it if you don't have the right mindset, if you're not constantly evaluating your thoughts and trying to become that person of integrity that we talked about on the previous page. So that's a great place to turn it over to the next teacher on learning to get rid of these negative traits by accentuating the positive. Don't accentuate the negative, accentuate the positive. So if you'll all give a nice round of applause for our next teacher, William.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. Great to see everyone here again at the at the Peaceful Solutions certification class. David did an excellent job of going over these traits. Yeah, very excellent job. He is a great teacher of the Peaceful Solution, as all of you also are becoming. I want to go back just quickly to that first positive or negative character trait on page 19. And that's the negative character trait of being uneducated. Okay, because I really want to emphasize something about what's in this definition. being a person that went through a lot of court cases in my lifetime, not lawsuits, but actual criminal cases. I've sat through many of them. I actually used to be a paralegal before, so some of the terminology that's used is familiar to me, and it jumps out at me when I see it. So I try to really emphasize to my students the importance of these words and really breaking down a sentence. Okay, so I want to read this. It says, uneducated means making a decision or drawing, a conclusion without getting all the facts. Without getting all the facts. Okay, now, I think there's a misunderstanding about the word facts, okay, that needs to be clarified to students when we learn the peaceful solution, because some people think when you say facts, that facts mean it's true. Okay, that factual means it's true. Well, not necessarily. Okay, I'm going to give you an example of how easy it is to think that way, because even in dictionary definitions you'll see this. I want you to see okay, here's a dictionary one of the dictionary definitions of fact. It says a thing that is known or proved to be true. Okay, a thing that is known or proved to be true. And then the second definition right below it says information used as evidence or as part of a report or news article. Okay, you see that? So let me read it one more time. The first definition says a thing that is known or proved to be true. Okay? The second one says information used as evidence or as part of a report or news article. Do you see, just from what you just saw right there, can you kind of see that there's a blur there in the line? Okay. If you're reading a news article, right? You're reading facts that are being presented by a newspaper or some kind of media, right? Are you sure that all the facts that they're presenting to you are actually true? Because they're presenting them as facts, right? But have you dug in and investigated and found out who, what, where, why, how, when, cross-referenced, checked other articles, checked other sources, or did you just believe that source? Okay, are you following my line of thinking? Okay, let's put it this way, because the peaceful solution is perfectly right. Go back to let's turn back to the positive character traits, the very first one, and I think it was Chris that covered this. Educated. Let's read educated now, because the peaceful solution gets it right. That's why it's very important to pay attention to the wording, what's being said. It says educated, getting all the facts and making sure they are correct. Making sure they're true facts. Oh, so that means there's false facts, right? Well, sure there is. If you've ever been in a court case, or if you've ever sat in a courtroom, or even watched, some kind of a courtroom show, if you'll notice, you have a judge, all right? And in not every case you're going to have a jury. Some people choose to have a court be judged by a judge, not by a jury. But the judge is there as a mediator. But now it's the judge's job to gather all the evidence or gather all the facts from both sides. Now, if you're the defendant and you have an attorney, okay, that attorney is first of all, the attorney's not going to get up first. The district attorney's going to get up first. The prosecutor, okay? the one that's trying to make a case against you, he's going to get up and he's going to present a series of facts and evidence that he is trying to persuade the judge to believe proves, or the jury, to prove that you are guilty of the crime that you're being accused of. So he's got all these facts laid out, and he presents this evidence, this factual evidence, in front of the jury or the judge. Okay? Once he's done, the defense attorney will get up, and the defense attorney will present facts, factual evidence and testimony, etc., to prove that the defendant did not do what this district attorney claims he did. Now, wait a minute. Are they both presenting facts? Okay. And some of the facts that they're presenting, they could be true. Both of them could be true facts, okay, in certain cases. But could they both be presenting true facts in every case if a crime was committed or not committed? In other words, some of those facts are not correct, are they? Because somebody's saying, I didn't do this crime, but they're saying you did do the crime. Somebody's trying to present facts to say you did commit this crime. Well, my point is real simple. There's true facts and there's false facts. And you're the judge. You're the judge. In the peaceful solution in your life, you're the judge. You have to decide, you need to invest, you need to gather all the evidence. Like in David talked about it as well. You know, you've got to gather all the evidence about any subject, and you've got to test it. You got to see, okay, is this, you know, in other words, you have to compare it. You have to get other sources. You can't just rely on one source. Okay, you've got to check it out and make sure that your facts are correct, because I just showed you a dictionary definition that goes counter to what you're learning in the peaceful solution, because it showed that the first actual definition was true because it said facts, true facts, right? But then the second one said, well, you could be reading a newspaper article, or you could be reading, you know, something that, you know, some book, and that's also factual. Well, it is factual, but are they true facts? That's what we need to figure out, right? Okay, so when you think of definitions, again, always go back to the definition found in the peaceful solution, because you can't go wrong if you do that. Otherwise, you can be misled, because you have to remember something about outside sources from the peaceful solution. They haven't been taught moral character. So they don't have all the facts yet. They don't have all the true facts, okay? So they're always going to have some kind of mixture in there, and you got to be careful not to fall into that. So having said that, you know what else used to really, in cases, in trials, or even watching them on television in the past, what I've noticed is, you know, they would bring in expert witnesses. Like let's say a murder takes place, right? And the district attorney, they'll hire an expert witness to come in to prove, like let's say on a certain subject, that let's say that this particular expert witness is an expert on bullet wounds and bullet entry, stuff like this. And so they'll go online and they'll hire an expert witness. They'll pay the witness to come in and testify that, you know, to match the facts that they're presenting in the case. But you know who else can hire an expert witness? The defense. The defense can also hire an expert witness. They can hire them. They can pay them to come in the courtroom and present their case centered around what you're trying to prove. In other words, backing up what you're saying is facts. Now, they're both experts, right? But they're both going to say something different, right? And why are they saying something different? But because they're being paid to. They're being paid to. They're being paid to. So they're both experts, but they're both supposed to be experts in the same field, but they're both saying something different. This is why it is so important to never just believe. You've got to dig deeper in the peaceful solution in our lives when we're making decisions about anything. And I was listening to David when he was talking about aggression, where it said that Carlos, back on page 20, it said that Carlos stepped on Rick's new shoes by mistake. Okay, now a mistake's not on purpose, right? I've given plenty of people what they call flat tires, walking in a crowded hallway, like possibly a school, and you step on the back of somebody's sole on their, on this back of their shoe, and it comes off, and they turn around like, hey, and it's like, you didn't do it on purpose. Most of the time it's not on purpose. Sometimes people do it on purpose, okay? But a lot of times it's inadvertent. They didn't mean to do it. Now notice that Carlos stepped on Rick's new shoes by mistake, and instead of waiting for Carlos to apologize, Rick immediately cursed him and pushed him against the wall. That means that this young man, and I'm everything that David said about this young man was excellent, because he brought up a lot of excellent points about this person being brought up a certain way. And certain people do get triggered very easily by things, okay? But when thinking about education or being uneducated, right? Did he get all the facts to make sure that boy did that purposely? Or did he just react on his emotions, on how he felt? What do you think? Yeah, you reacted on his feelings. He was probably, how would you feel if somebody stepped on the back of your shoe and gave you a flat tire? That's what they call it, a flat tire. What do you think? How would you feel? Well, you'd probably feel embarrassed, humiliated, right? You might even feel disrespected, right? Feel disrespected, but David also mentioned in disrespect, right? Not all disrespect is purposeful. Some people might disrespect us inadvertently. They might not do it on purpose. Okay? Okay. So that's why it's important to get educated about everything, including what occurred there in that scenario. We need to get educated about everything. And let's say that he did ask him, hey, by the way, did you step on my shoe on purpose? And let's say that he did say, yeah, I stepped on it on purpose. Would that give him the right to slam him against the wall? No. But again, remember, people need to be educated. They need to be brought up. That's where that word educated means. It's the etymology of that word educated means to rear up, to bring up. Okay? They need to be brought. They haven't been brought up with moral character, right? Most people. So you got to give them that benefit of the doubt. Now, and I also wanted to hit on something on this hateful, this intense emotion that results in extreme dislike and hostility. And David again made an excellent point in his presentation where he said, hate is derived from fear. Fear is an emotion. And I want you to go back to page, go back to page, because I believe it was Chris or Catan that brought this forward. Let's see. I'm sorry. Trying to find the right page here. Should have wrote it down, but okay. Let's see. Oh, okay. Yeah, where it's back on in the positive character traits where it says responsible. Responsibility on page 17. Look at the bottom of the page. The very last sentence or the very last paragraph, it says, remember this, basing your decisions on facts, not emotions, is important to building true moral character. Let me read that again. Remember this, basing your decisions or your judgments or, arriving at conclusions based on facts, not emotions, is important to building true moral character. When you gather all the facts, you're able to make a better decision than when you only have a portion of the facts. Okay? You've got to get all the information. You've got to get all the evidence. Remember, you're a judge. You've got to gather these things, and you've got to gather all them facts, and you got to make sure that those facts are true. Because not all facts are true. So when you hear the word fact, stop thinking true. Because not all facts are true. But there are true facts. And that's why the peaceful solution tells us, make sure the facts that you're getting are true before you make a decision. So hate's an intense emotion that results in extreme dislike and hostility. Hate is derived from fear, anger, or perceived injury. Fear and anger are both emotions. They're both negative emotions, okay? But we can control them. We can learn to control those things, and we should. Or it says perceived injury. Perceived injury. What does that mean, perceived injury? Well, that means you think or you feel that you were harmed in some way, that you were done wrong. Okay, you perceive that. But could your perception be wrong? Could it be possible that the person that did this injury didn't do it on purpose? Is it possible? Is it possible that they didn't really know what they were doing and they did it inadvertently? Is that possible? Yes, it is. So remember something else about hate. We're not born hating people. Like David said, we might be born with a gene within us. We might have had somebody in our past, in our family line that carried that gene of hatred toward possibly certain people of certain skin color, people of certain religions, so on and so forth. They might have carried that, and you might have a propensity or an urge or a desire in that going that way, but you can control that. You can learn to control that through character education. But children are not born hating, okay? They're taught to hate. There's a term that's used all the time that really I'd like to go and I'd like to talk to the media about, some of these media people that use it. I'd like to educate them about the terms they use. Have you ever heard them say people of color? You ever heard the term people of color? Well, what are people of color in their eyes? Black, brown, some other skin tone other than white, right? Well, guess what? When you look in a crayon box, isn't there a white in there? White's in there too, isn't it? So then we're people of color too then, right? Everybody has color, some kind of color, right? This is why we really need to really stop and think and consider and get educated and check these meanings and stop and think and consider things before we believe them or before we want to start using them in our terminology or in our everyday speech and language. Okay? And I'm not saying that because I'm white and I'm trying to stick up for white people. What I'm saying is there's every color in a crayon box. So everyone's a person of color. And when we say things like that, that's the kind of thing that hatred is spawned from. Is when people feel like they're being isolated or that they're being singled out or that they're being dismissed or disrespected. That's what creates hate in the world. That's why there's so much hatred. Did you know that people fighting wars right now in Africa? I remember in Rwanda back in the early 90s. Do you know that people were actually hacking arms and limbs off because people were from different tribes? I think it was the Hutsi or the Tutsis and the, you remember the other name? Chris? Tutsis and who? Hutsis, okay. I knew it was kind of similar. Sorry, Chris. I knew it was somewhat similar. But they were hacking each other's arms and legs off and doing these things because they were different tribes. Okay? And they were the same color, but they were from different tribes. But these are the things that are taking place in the world because hate is being taught. hate is being, it's on the internet. You go on the internet, you read all these crazy ideas people come up with, that haven't been taught. Again, remember, they haven't been taught moral character. Okay, they haven't been taught the peaceful solution, because if they were, they would know the things that they're saying are not true facts. They're not true facts. Okay, because everybody in the world, remember, everyone deserves what? To be treated with care and concern. Everyone has the right to live in peace, safety, and security. Everyone. The word everyone, you have to underline it. Everyone. That means everyone of every color, religion, ethnicity, culture. Everybody needs to be treated with that respect, okay? So, now, I'm probably not going to go into this part about accentuating the negative, because we've run out of time. I think the teachers that are coming next can cover this. But I do want us to recall and remember what we've learned here about these negative traits. And becoming a person of integrity, I want us to also be thinking about, in order to become a person of integrity, we've got to, first of all, value these positive traits. We've got to learn to value these traits, and we need to see the value of them in our lives. Okay? I've asked many people teaching peaceful solution classes what they value, and some people say, well, I value my family, I value life, I value health, I value education. And those are all great, but guess what? If you don't value a positive character more than anything, if you don't value being honest, value being respectful, value being forgiving, value being reliable, and all those things, you know what? You could lose those other things that you think are valuable. You could lose it all. You could end up going to prison. You can end up sick. Your health destroyed. You could end up dead. And none of those things will matter. So having a positive moral character is really the most important thing all of us should value, and we need to keep that in mind. And we need to see the benefit of all these character traits that we're being taught here in the Peaceful Solution. Now, I believe the next class is going to be on 12/16 at 5:30 p.m. Again, 12/16 at 5:30 p.m. You're all doing a great job. It's really cold out there tonight, but y'all got here. Excellent job. Keep coming, keep coming, because it's changing your heart and mind as you come and you learn, okay? And you practice too. And thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.